Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand what is going wrong in the state of Manipur. Now, for a long period of time, to be precise, since 2023, the state of Manipur has been under a spate of ethnic violence, which includes primarily two warring sides. On one side, there is a community called as Meiteis, who inhabit the valley regions of the state and they are majority in number. And on the other hand, there are tribes who live in the hill portions of the state that are Nagas, Kukis, Zomis, etc. Now, the conflict which is happening in these two warring sides just did not begin in 2023. You need to understand the reasons of this conflict can be traced to the fractured history of the state of Manipur. So in our today's video, we'll try to understand why this fractured history has resulted into present conflict. But before ending this video, we'll also try to understand what can be the steps taken, not just by the government, but also by people of Manipur in order to move ahead of this problem by leaving the problem behind. Okay, so you can treat this video as an all-encompassing video where I'll cover everything which you need to understand about the prevailing situations in the Manipur. Now, the reason why I have picked up this topic for our today's discussion is because last week violence again flared out in Manipur, where two children, a 4-year-old boy and a newborn sister, were killed when a rocket-like projectile struck their home in the Bishnupur village in the state of Manipur. Now, naturally, this sparked protest in which two civilians were killed. Now, Manipur, it does not just burn with this single blaze. The blaze that has happened in the state for the past few years, as I told you, can be traced back to the fractured history. So moving forward, we need to understand what is happening. Let me give you a gist of what is happening. For more than 3 years now, since it began in May 2023, the state, which consists of more than 30 lakh of people, there are 3.2 million people in the state to be precise, and they have been affected by ethnic violence which happens between the dominant Meitei community and the hill living tribes like Kuki-Zo, etc. And as a result of this ethnic violence, more than 260 people have been killed. This is an official figure I'm telling you about. And more than 60,000 people have been displaced away from their home and they are forced to live in segregated relief camps. So this is the scale of the humanitarian problem we are talking about. But to understand the scale of a problem, we have to take a very structured approach. We'll try to understand the fault lines that creates the divide in the state, and I'll tell you this has a British origin. Similarly, we'll also try to understand what was the precise trigger that led to violence which started from 2023. And before ending the video, as I told you, we will also try to understand whether this fragile shape of peace that are being set up in the state of Manipur, is it likely to continue or will the violence resume again? Okay, now the notes which I will be using for our today's session, in case if you want to download them, you can go to a particular Telegram channel called as ADS Live, and while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so let us start our today's discussion by understanding the history of the erstwhile princely state of Manipur. Now, you can understand colonially, Manipur acted as an independent princely kingdom known as Kanglepak, right? Now, for the first time, it fell under Burmese invasion, which happened in 18th century, and eventually it established itself as a protectorate state of the British Raj. Now, Britishers, when they established their indirect control over this state by recognizing the suzerainty of then king, it started to do what it was known to do best. The Britishers started to divide and rule, and they adopted this strategy in order to continue the fragmentation that had already happened in the society of Manipur back then. Now, you need to understand Meitei communities, as I told you, inhabit the valley regions of the district in and around the capital region of Imphal, which is very fertile, by the way. They are primarily Hindus and they account for roughly 53% of the state's population. On the other hand, there are a handful of tribes like Naga, Kuki, Zomis, etc., primarily who are Christian by the religious denomination, right? And they inhabit the mountainous regions of the state. Now, you need to understand the larger portion of this state of Manipur, which constitutes of Meitei, more than 50% of them, they live in 10% of the area of the state. And on the other hand, the minorities, the hill tribes, they live in an area which constitutes 90% of the land of the state. So there is also a difference in the number and the amount of land resources that they conclude. So this is the first problem that emerged in the society, and this problem was aggravated by whom? This was aggravated by the colonial administration because they started to follow divide and rule strategy. Right now, after India got independent, the state of Manipur had a question whether they want to become a part of Indian Union or they want to live as an independent country. They chose to get themselves integrated with the Indian Union in 1949, right? Now, the conditions in which Manipur was integrated into Indian Union, even today, it continues to be disputed. That is, many groups, they feel that the merger agreement, which the then king signed with the Indian Union, was signed under duress by then Maharaja Bodh Chandra Singh, right? And many people feel it was done without the consent of the Legislative Assembly of Manipur. So after it got integrated, which by the way is disputed, you need to understand they passed a law, and this law led to another aggravation of the divide which persisted in the Manipur society back then. For example, a Manipur Land Revenue and Land Reforms Act was passed in 1960, and it prohibits non-tribals, primarily Meiteis, from buying lands in the hills, and it also gives hill communities like Nagas, Kuki-Zo, etc. the scheduled tribe status guaranteed to them by the Constitution of India. And this scheduled tribe status, it grants protective quotas for hill tribes in jobs, education, as well as ensures political representation in both Legislative Assembly as well as Parliament of India. So these are the benefits given to the hill tribes. Why? They are being designated as a scheduled tribe. Now, Meiteis, on the other hand, as they did not have access to land resources because of the prohibition done by the Revenue Act, they got aggravated, and they further felt squeezed because they were classified as other backward classes community, which did not have so much constitutional guarantees as it was provided to scheduled tribes. On the other hand, as the population progressed, as the state of economy progressed, the population of Meitei started to grow, and the valley region, which already had too much population pressure, the land resources controlled by Meiteis, it started to get fragmented. And on the other hand, as I told you, hill tribes, which are far lesser in number, they held vast reserved forest to land, which Meiteis can't procure legally, right? So this complex web of grievances that aggravated in form of Meitei community, it took shape in form of ethno-nationalistic insurgency groups, right? So each and every community, as will go forward, has started to form their insurgency groups. For example, there was this United National Liberation Front and People Liberation Army in Manipur, which started demanding a separate land, a separate state for Meiteis. On the other hand, Naga tribes, Kuki tribes started to demand the same. Nationalist Socialist Council of Naga, their various factions started to pursue demand for a united Nagaland homeland, that is Nagalim, and the Kuki communities, their militants groups, they started to form, or they started to demand an autonomous Kuki land. So each and every sections of the society of Manipur wanted a separate land for themselves, which created a constitutional problem in India. How often do you want to divide your own state? Right? Now, after that, because of this existing divide in the state, it led to decades of instability in the politics. As I told you, eventually when this grievances, it got militarized in form of the insurgents group, they started to fight with each other, and this problem aggravated in 1990s when Naga Kuki violence reached to an all-time high. To control this violence, obviously the Indian state passed an act called as Armed Force Special Powers Act, which gives more powers to the armed force in order to control this violence. Now, the consequence of this decades of instability and eventual intervention by the state using UPSC Act, it led to whatever modicum of development was possible, it did not resulted into it, right? Now, this historical trauma which already existed, it got further aggravated in 2010s, right? And external situation actually led to it. Now we need to understand the neighboring country which Manipur shares its border with, Myanmar, it started to witness their own tension. Right? An influx of Chin Kuki refugees started fleeing Myanmar, and they eventually ended up entering into Manipur. Now, this influx of undocumented immigrants, when they entered into Manipur, it created a demographic pressures in a state which already was economic underdeveloped. And to make matters worse, a significant chunk of population, they started cultivating poppy. The reasons of cultivation of poppy in this part of the globe is because of its proximity to Golden Triangle. So do let me know in the comment section what all countries constitute a Golden Triangle. So I told you the state, because of the divide, because of the instability, was already politically and economically underdeveloped, and to make matters worse, influx of undocumented refugees started to happen from Myanmar itself, which led to aggravation of this problem. Contest of resources over the resources which was already less in number to support the population and meeting economic demands of the domestic population, right? Now, in middle of all of this, the Meitei community started to demand for ST status, and this actually got aggravated because of communities or committees like Scheduled Tribe Demand Committee, right? This committee started to demand for promised hill land access, and they also wanted to access to quotas in order to get themselves admitted into public service and quotas for admissions in the governmental institutions, right? Now, this demand from the Meitei community acted as an ideological timber. For Meitei communities, it proved to be a point which led to agreement of all the people within the community, but on the other hand, outside Meitei communities, it started to aggravate the problem which already existed. Now, tribal communities in the state, Kuki-Zo, Naga, etc., saw this demand from the Meitei communities as an existential threat to them, right? So they thought, if this Meitei community will get the ST status, it will result into systematic dilution of protected land rights which are given to other hill tribes. Similarly, they also feared that it might lead to their own demographic marginalization in a state which they are inhabiting for a long period of time. So this insecurity, which already was in the mind of hill tribes because of the demands of Meitei communities, got aggravated, and it made the entire situation in the state very much volatile. To add to this problem, we need to understand the situation volatile. In this scenario enters a politician known as N. Biren Singh. N. Biren Singh, if you don't know, the former chief minister of Manipur, he is also former footballer and a BJP politician. And things got developed in 2017 where BJP won the election and they were able to form the government, and who was made CM? N. Biren Singh. If you don't know him, Biren Singh hails from Meitei community himself, and he secured re-election again in 2022. Now, one of his contested policies of the N. Biren Singh government, which started functioning from 2017 onwards, is they started their aggressive policy of forest eviction drives. Now, this forest eviction drive, actually or officially by the administration, was sought to deal with environmental reasons. They felt that a significant portion of the state's reserve forest was actually encroached upon by illegal immigrants, and they were cultivating poppy while doing the land, right? So this was the official reason provided by the administration. But many people, especially the Kuki tribes, they feel that invariably the administration targeted the Kuki hamlets more as compared to other communities' hamlet. So this situation, which already was volatile, saw a trigger in form of these eviction drives. Now, in March 2023 itself, the state government of Manipur, it withdrew from the 2008 suspension of agreement which they signed with many Kuki militant organizations. The reason given by the state government was that these Kuki militant organizations were inciting the protest against the state administration, and the rhetoric which the government under the leadership of a Meitei leader used, that Kukis were painted as illegal immigrants, they were painted as narco terrorists, and to make matters worse, the bodies like Arambai Tengol and Manipur Leban, which are the militant organizations of Meitei communities, they started to use this rhetoric and started to aggravate and pursue this rhetoric more, and this created a situation which was very volatile. This created a situation which aggravated and exacerbated the difference, and as a result, the trigger point, we need to understand what actually resulted into violence. I told you the situation already was very volatile because of the persecution as it was imbibed or as it was seen by the communities like Kukis, that the state administration were invariably targeting them. So they were already aggrieved. To make matters worse, the Manipur High Court, in an order passed in April 2023, instructed the state government to evaluate the possibilities whether the Meitei communities can be included in the list of scheduled tribes or not. And this actually acted as a lightning conductor to the already volatile situation. While this HC directive was eventually withdrawn by the directions of Supreme Court, but because of this instigation, the tribal groups, they organized large-scale protests, and this large-scale protest by tribal groups ran into Meitei counter-blockade. So the situation which was worse was made even worse. Now this led to violence that we saw originated in 2023. On May 3rd, 2023, there was a strong stone pelting and arson incident which happened in the bordering regions of Churachandpur and Bishnupur districts, right? And by the evening, Kuki mobs had already tossed many Meitei populations and properties. To counter this violence done by Kukis and Meitei's mob, they retaliated against by burning Kuki settlements, churches, and invariably they even destroyed their homes. And within 48 hours, within just 2 days of time, the most of the regions of the state, including Imphal West and East, Kangpoi, Kakching, Tengopal, all of these regions saw violence. So this was the beginning of violence which started in May 2023. To control this violence, state government and its administration imposed curfew. They issued a shoot on sight orders. They ordered for internet blockade, but all of this resulted and led to continued violence. To deal with violence, security forces were deployed in large numbers. You'll be surprised to know the number of security personnel deployed them. It included 126 columns and 62 paramilitary companies. And early containment measures, even if it was taken by the administration, proved to be very sporadic, proved to be very uncoordinated. And because of this uncoordinated and sporadic early intervention by the security forces, many weapons vanished from the police armories, and eventually these weapons are the ones that led to violence that has happened after 2023. Now, the initial phase of this conflict, which was triggered by the violence, it led to an acute humanitarian crisis. It led to over 50 deaths, and mass displacement began by people who were living in the fringe areas, the areas where the hill regions and valley regions actually meet. Okay, now this violence, it proved to be protracted. By late 2024, state officially had confirmed that there were 258 people who lost their lives and more than 60,000 people were displaced, and they were forced to live in makeshift camps where the quality of life, as you can understand, is quite worse. Right now, the consequence of this all violence that I told you is that the Meiteis, they evacuated themselves from the hills, and whosoever hill tribes like Kukis, they were living in the valley, they fled their homes, right? Now, this profound geographic segregation between the different sections of society, limiting themselves in the valley and hill regions separately, led to emergence of what? Parallel administrations, right? Now, bodies like Arambai Tengol, who now control significant portion of Imphal Valley, and there are coalition of Kuki militant networks who control the hill areas, right? So what we saw, instead of state administration controlling these areas, the control of these areas passed to militant ethnic militant groups, right? Now, the state government under the N. Bireng Singh faced accusation of bias, which made matters worse, and eventually under the directive, N. Bireng Singh was forced to resign as of February 2025, and it resulted into a time where for more than 1 year, the state was under president's rule. Now, because of president's rule, many things went good, many things went bad, right? But it led overall the establishment of the governance of Union Home Ministry over the state matters, right? Although the violence, it never stopped even during president's rule, but because of many reasons, specifically due to mutual exhaustion between the warring parties and the precarious buffer zones that was laid by the Central Armed Police Forces, it led to gradual cooling down of violence, and the intensity of violence, if not completely stopped, it reduced. So this was the consequence of the establishment of president's rule. Now, an uneasy truce developed, right? The establishment of central rule over the state led to rigorous disarmament initiatives where many people surrendered their arms, which they looted from the state armories itself, and it expanded humanitarian relief. Although it failed to eventually stop the violence, but you can understand this formidable existence of a rule over the state eventually cooled down the tensions. Consequently, to stop the violence, a formidable contingent exceeding 250 armed force companies, they still are deployed, and this is because the state of violence in the state is quite volatile. Now, what you have to understand is that a glimmer of hope actually originated. This glimmer of hope actually originated in form of reinstatement of the elected administration in February 2026 itself. Now, there are many reasons why people or the government of India was forced to allow the establishment of elected government. It is because of constitutional obligation. You can't continue the president's rule over a 1 year period of time if there is no national emergency imposed in any part of the country, or there is no certificate of election commission that they can't hold elections in the same. So as there was, these two conditions were not met, and that is why the elected government was restored. Now there are many good reasons why this elected government was restored, and they brought many good initiatives also. First of all, they tried to bridge the ethnic divide by including many ministers in the cabinet from the Kuki and Naga communities, and they also reconvened legislative assembly, which led to cooling down of political tensions in this state. Now, early government initiatives by this elected government, they have started to reconcile via military-backed integrations, and they've set up a high-level federal discussions with the refugee settlement with an intention to cool down the settlements. Now, what will be the road ahead? Because even if the government has come back into power in Manipur, but still the situation is not back to normal, because relief camp still houses tens of thousands of people. The economic life in the state continues to be disrupted, and the inter-district transportation, which is very much necessary for the normalcy of life, still is not back to normal. So what should be done by the government? Let us understand this. For the start, we need to understand the government needs to recover all the looted weapons. And for that, they can start by dismantling the vigilante and militant palace structure, which continues to rule over a significant portion of the state. Outside that, the government should try to pursue inclusive dialogue, and this should include credible peace communities, and we should try to exclude the tainted figures from these kind of committees. Now, this committee should include women leaders, because eventually the women are the ones who have bore the brunt of trauma, and civil society members from all sides needs to be included, and any demand which should emerge for granting of ST status to Meitei should be discussed transparently. There is no need to give the status without any discussion. If this status needs to be given, it should be given with the consensus of all communities, and the government should order for a broader review of quotas and laws so that they become exclusive, right, and they should not lead to exclusion of any communities from the same. Additionally, the government should identify the root cause of this problem. The root cause of this problem is the lack of development in the hill regions. The government should accelerate the hill developments. Now, further, the government should also regulate poppy cultivation by providing alternative livelihoods to the tribal groups, and should not result into punitive evictions. Also, government needs to focus on reviving the suspension of operation agreements with providing safeguards to these communities that no state-specific bias will be directed against them. Similarly, we need to fix accountability. There needs to be complete probes in the audio tape, sexual violations, allegations against police and the administration that was made, so that the problems are addressed transparently. Similarly, you need to establish reconciliation trust. Truth and reconciliation forums needs to be established. They needs to be popular. Community youth camps, economic packages tied to joint projects must be established, so that an overall a positive climate starts to develop in the state of Manipur, right? So this is an all-encompassing video on the state of Manipur, on why things have gone so bad and what was the reason behind it. But more importantly, we should take a look with a focus on how things can be made better in Manipur. Regardless of wherever you live in this country, all of us are very conscious of the problems that the Manipur is facing, and to keep these problems behind, people of Manipur, more importantly these warring communities, needs to move forward, because ultimately the best for all is for establishment of peace and forgetting and punishing the people who have been responsible for this violence. Now, before we move to a practice question that I've curated, especially keeping UPSC in mind, there's an important announcement. You need to take admissions in UPSC courses, because eventually any solution that should come for the state of Manipur, it should come from the young generation people. And young generation people, you need to understand, if you need to make an impact on your homeland, that is Manipur, you need to become the part of the state, and there is no better option for you than become a part of bureaucracy. Be Indian Administrative Services officers, be IPS or Forest Services officers, and bring much needed change that is required in your homeland. Okay, now before we move forward, there is an important question that you can solve. Which of the following Indian states share a border with the country of Myanmar? Do let me know the correct answers in the comment section, and what do you feel about this issue? Also, please do let me know in the comment section, right? And the ones who are waiting to download the notes, you can go to this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live, and while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel as well. So this is all from my side. Please have a very good night.